The Founding Fathers never set out to create a pure democracy. In fact, the United States isn't one. It's a republic. But what's the real difference? And why did they believe a pure democracy could be dangerous? That's what we're unpacking in today's episode. We'll also bring you our POC Top 3 for the week, as well as some news you can't use. All that and more ahead in this week's episode of The Physics of Civics.
Jay, we've been hearing a whole lot really politically charged warnings from various sides about supposed threats to our, quote, our democracy. What democracy are those warnings pertaining to exactly? And now, I mean, America isn't really a democracy at all, right?
It's a form of democracy, I guess you could say. And that's what the subject of today's topic is, understanding the difference between a true democracy and a republic, which is what our founding fathers set up as a system for our government, right? It's a democratic republic. So today we're going to take a few minutes to explain the difference if you don't know, or maybe you have an idea, but it's not crystal clear to you.
Yeah, or some people just might think there are two words that mean basically the same thing.
Yeah, when you see these politicians screaming about end of our democracy, well, you know.
Yes.
Whatever.
And for the sake of the republic.
Yeah, for the sake of politics. But the basic definitions are pretty simple, really. There's essentially two types of democracies before you get to a republic. You've got a direct democracy, which is where the citizens vote on everything, which is just not practical. And then you have a representative democracy, which is very similar to a republic in that people vote for representatives to vote for them on different laws and so forth.
Right. The people don't decide, but they can decide who gets to decide.
The Physics of Civics is the podcast for people who don't need celebrities to tell them what to think. So join us, hit that follow button, subscribe, comment, and let's take common sense off the endangered species list.
This episode of The Physics of Civics is brought to you by Savage Soaps. Cleanse, nourish, and revitalize your skin with luxurious handcrafted soaps for men and women, all made right here in the USA with sustainable, locally sourced ingredients. Shop SavageSoaps.com for soaps, body butter, salt scrubs, and other skin-loving products. Get wet with Savage Soaps.
The fear of a representative democracy was that the minority could just be squashed.
Right.
And so in a republic, you vote for a representative, and then they make the decisions on laws and so forth. But the difference is they're governed by our Constitution. So that sets forth the limits of the majority, which is critical to the success of our system for 250 years.
Would you say that's what is true of a representative democracy is also true of a direct democracy? If it's majority rule, the minority is out of luck.
And that's why they have basically what is similar to a representative democracy, with the exception of you have guidelines.
Okay.
To make an example, you have to have both houses of Congress pass a law, and then the president has to sign that law, or he can veto the law, or she.
Right.
But then you've still got the judiciary who can set controls should they go to the courts. So we've got all these checks and balances.
Right. Or somebody could bring to the Supreme Court, they could strike down the law entirely.
Which has happened recently. Sure.
Yeah.
And I mean, we've seen that many times over in the last 250 years. Then you get to, why does the republic limit the majority? What's the purpose of it? Why did the founding fathers think that was so important? And they were right, by the way. And there's several reasons. And the first is obviously the protection of individual rights. Because if you think about it, in a pure democracy, if 51% of the population agrees on whatever, well, then they can theoretically violate the rights of the other 49% easily.
They could.
But in a republic, you've got, as I mentioned, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, you've got independent judiciary, and you've got all these checks and balances. So they can limit things like freedom of speech or religion or, due process. Those things cannot be trampled upon because they're set forth no matter who the majority is.
Right. Now, abuses still can occur, but it's just so much more difficult and easier to remedy.
Yeah, well, that's the point.
Just because of all the the divisions and separations
And that's how
branches.
they saw it. They said, how can we protect against this? If we have a political majority, there's so many things they could do to squash the minority. And we've seen that happen in many cases.
Essentially, you've got a lynch mob.
That's right. And here's a great example. Texas versus Johnson, 1989. The Supreme Court ruled that burning the American flag, which is an act that, without a doubt, the majority of Americans at the time felt was offensive and shouldn't be allowed, shouldn't be legal to burn a flag. Well, the Supreme Court came back and Johnson won. They said, he was protected under free speech, under the First Amendment, and they gave him the right. Individual rights cannot be overwritten by a majority opinion. So there's a great case, a flag burning case. Now, most of us think that's disgusting, burning the American flag.
It's repugnant.
It is.
Free speech is free speech. I mean,
that's it.
He's expressing himself politically, and I don't care how he does it. I might find it repugnant, but he's got a right.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Or she, or they.
The law, as I said, has to pass both houses. It can be vetoed or it can be signed. And you still got the Supreme Court or lower courts that can overturn these decisions.
And there are things like the filibuster, which can just hold up the works forever. And it's like the minority is in the driver's seat on those. Hence this reconciliation bill, all done to skirt that power of filibuster that the minority possesses. But still, it's one more way that they prevent the minority from being run roughshod over by the majority.
Exactly. One of the other points to talk about or that affect a republic are federalism. Because obviously all this is being wrapped around federal law, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, the Constitution, Bill of Rights, all that, that's federal. The power, though, is in our country and many who are set up with this system, it's still split between the federal and the state governments. If there's a national majority on something, it can't always override state laws and practice. So it preserves kind of a regional diversity and a self-governance. And here's a great example something that Phil, you and I know a lot about. Under the Controlled Substance Act of 1970, marijuana was classified as a Schedule I controlled substance, meaning it's illegal for use, recreational or medical. It was in the same category as LSD and heroin, right?
Because it was deemed to have had no medical value and with the possibility of addiction, neither of which is true.
You've got a federal law which supersedes state laws. So you got a federal law that essentially says it's illegal to have cannabis, marijuana. But in Gonzalez versus Rake, 2005, the Supreme Court ruled that the federal government could regulate marijuana under the Commerce Clause. Even if the marijuana was grown and used entirely within one state. So what happened is states started passing laws saying, okay, you can use it here.
Yeah, the Commerce Clause is used for all kinds of
crap.
It's a real workaround.
It is, and it's
one of the best workarounds in legislation.
And that's what the Supreme Court ruling did exactly. So essentially, California, Oregon, whatever state wanted to, could pass a law saying, we're going to let people, we're going to regulate and let people buy cannabis. And so that is a great example of, the feds against the state. So while federal law technically trumps state law, the federal government has not taken steps to aggressively intervene in the states in this matter for legalized marijuana. They basically
and the Obama administration issued the Cole memo and said, you know what, we're not going to interfere with the states exercising their own cannabis laws.
And I think the intent there, not to
executing,
spend too much time on marijuana, but we have a little experience with that with a podcast we did a few years ago. So I think the
Vote Pro podcast we did for several years.
Vote Pro podcast. So the intent there with the memo was to buy some time. Let's let the federal government, Congress, pass a law or at least take it off schedule. So anyway, that's an example of state versus federal. Another thing that falls into this, the reason why we don't want to be a pure democracy is the electoral safeguard. We've got an electoral college. So think about that in terms of, how it would work if you had a pure democracy. It would just be too cumbersome, especially with this. I mean, and our founding fathers realized that, Phil, when this was a tiny little country.
Right.
And now we've got, hundreds
Well,
of
when this was
millions
a
of
tiny
people.
little country, Virginia was the center of the universe
That's right.
as far as the colonies were concerned. And there was New York and Pennsylvania, and then there was the other 10.
Right. But the total population was nothing compared.
But they argued over, well, if New York has the same representation as South Carolina, how is that fair? We got so many more people, we should have more say. And so they structured it the way they did. The Electoral College was also, the idea that the states elect a president, not necessarily the people. And it's a way for each state. So you don't have just New York and Chicago and California and then deciding everything and flyover country in the middle
has no
gets
say.
ignored.
No one would vote anymore in Wyoming,
No.
and I mean it was a brilliant idea, especially for the time. I mean, imagine now if we got rid of the Electoral College, what would be the point of voting if you didn't live in Florida, California, New York, Illinois? What would be the point? I mean, if you lived in the middle of the country, why bother?
Yeah.
And the point there, if you don't understand it, is that California still gets a lot of electoral votes because it's based on population.
Right.
But nothing compared to their real true population. So and we see this a lot. I mean, not to get off topic too badly, but it's not uncommon to see one candidate win the popular vote in the national presidential election, but not win the electoral vote. And
in fact, that's been kind of typical.
Yeah, I mean, it has.
When a Republican wins until this last time.
But Hillary Clinton.
And that's not really off topic at all, but it is a good point.
Talking about the weaknesses of pure democracy and what the founding fathers realized, why it wouldn't work. And they were absolutely right. Why it wouldn't work.
In fact, it didn't take them very long to come to that conclusion. Most of the Constitutional Congress at that point, the Constitutional Convention, was not about whether you'd have a republic, but how to make the republic work.
And they realized that it would be so inefficient. First of all, think about this just from the standpoint of you and I, we're pretty active in paying attention to politics and voting. I vote every election, and most, I would say a majority or close to a majority of the population do. But think about the complexity of these bills. What if we had to vote on every freaking bill? 90% of the population wouldn't even read it.
And a great example of that is you look down your ballot on election day and you've got the candidates, and then a lot of places, especially California, has bond initiatives.
That's right.
And what do they call them in California, where they have a referendum? Should the government be spending this money on this? And they have and it's they put it to a popular vote in the state of California. Well, who reads that crap? I don't.
And most
voters don't.
They don't pay attention. And when they get into the ballot to go into the booth to vote, they see it for the first time, and there's a little one paragraph description, and they're like, I'll go with yes.
I don't know. It sounds all right to me. Whatever.
If we had a pure democracy, Phil, and you had all the citizens had to make decisions on these huge bills, how much money we spend on, the Defense Department. So anyway, that's
non-starter.
Obvious that would not work. And then just the logistics. I mean, just the logistics of trying to, if you think about how many bills go through Congress, and there's just no way that you could have that happen. So that was one of the potential. Right. And then there's so much potential for manipulation because, for example, you have a bill that's complex like that. Okay.
Right.
And then, so you got all the citizens have to vote on it. Well, it's just going to become a marketing campaign,
Right. And it would be very easy for the press to sway things in a certain way, Yeah.
We've seen a lot of that.
If we've seen it with if there's a bias in the press on certain things. So it would be
and that's why you vote for a representative in your district that you feel has the wherewithal to study these things and vote the way you want them to vote. That's the whole idea. Right. So it works beautifully. Right. So I think that kind of covers the difference between a pure democracy and a republic. One thing I would touch on before we close out is, how could a republic like ours fall apart? What could cause it to not work any longer? And when you look at some of these points, I'm going to point some things out, and you're going to say, wow, that sounds kind of familiar. And we've seen these things happen. We've seen republics and democratic governments collapse. Venezuela is a perfect example.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think loss of public trust.
That's the number one.
Is probably it's got to be number one, because if people don't feel that their vote matters, they won't bother.
And we've seen that happen before. Now, this turnout in the last election was pretty heavy because people felt
it was. I remember, though, back in the 80s and 90s, they were talking about, well, we got another record low turnout here.
Especially for local
people.
elections. But yeah.
And I don't think public trust has increased since that time.
No, and I think another thing related to voting is if elections start losing credibility, if you start to not trust the process.
Right, that's kind of part and parcel.
And we've seen that recently as well, where, ballot dumping. And I mean, let's be honest, after COVID or during that election, there was some pretty sleazy stuff that went on in the election. No matter what side, I mean, try to put politics and left and right out of it. The fact that our government officials and local bureaucracies and local governments were changing laws without jurisdiction to do so, allowing ballots to be counted later, allowing them to, not allowing certain voting principles that are in law.
Well, keeping observers from one party out of the counting rooms. They were doing that.
Yes, they were. And, ballot box packing, and that's some of the things that can cause a republic to collapse. Hopefully we've given you a little bit of a better feel for what the difference between a pure democracy and a republic are. And I think we've proved for 250 years that this system works pretty well as long as we keep the checks and balances in control.
Yeah. Yeah. No matter, some people aren't going to like how it works out.
Yeah.
But the fact that,
got to protect the process.
Yeah. The process is still there after 250 years. I'd say that's pretty good.
I'd say so too. It is time for our top 3. And this week, we've come up with a unique one. It's things I've changed my mind about. Okay, so 3 things that each of us have changed over time our minds about.
So we're talking about,
it could be anything.
Music, food, politics, a political point.
Whatever.
Anything.
Yeah. You go first. What's your 3?
All right. Well, I think the first thing that comes to mind is coconut. When I was growing up, coconut was that kind of greasy, dry, shredded stuff you got in a bag that you put on top of cakes. It didn't taste very good. Or the stuff on top of a Hostess snowball. You remember Hostess snowballs?
Those are disgusting.
That was the one Hostess cake that sucked. All the other ones were great.
I think that's why they're gone now, aren't they?
And you always got pissed off when you got a Hostess snowball in your lunch. Hey, you want a snowball? I'll trade your snowball for your ho-ho. So coconut, but real coconut. Later in life, I tasted real coconut, and now it's good.
I love it, man.
I love it. So, number 2, I would say is, I've had my mind changed for a while now, but Tom Brady. I used to think
New England quarterback.
Well, he was like, the New England Patriots quarterback and multi Super Bowl champion. As a Washington Redskins fan growing up, he was like
hated his guts.
The worst thing that could ever happen to football. But he was good.
Yeah.
And he didn't play on my team.
Right, exactly.
So I hated him. We always kind of put him down. Oh, there's, between him and Peyton, Peyton's so much better, blah, 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 blah. Nah. I've and you can't argue with the success that he's had. So I've come around on Tom Brady.
I'm with you on that. Yeah. I now I look at him with just admiration. Like, this guy was Amazing.
Kind of with all.
Yeah, with all. That's even a better word. It's incredible.
And if you watched the Super Bowl against the Atlanta Falcons, where Atlanta was up by so much, I forget what the total comeback was, and it was like, middle of the third quarter, down by 24 points. No problem.
Yeah, I mean, the guy got this. Basically is let go after winning the Super Bowl, and he goes to a brand new team, and he wins another Super Bowl.
and a team that has sucked for years. So I think we can put to rest was it Tom or was it
Belichick?
Argument. It was Tom.
Okay,
it was Brady.
I'm with you on that one.
Number one, and this is kind of odd considering what you and I used to do for quite a while with Vote Pro Podcast. I was at one time adamantly opposed to legalizing any drugs of any kind for any reason, and it seems so foreign to me now, but I was.
Yeah.
Now I want them all legal, and the government to keep its nose out of it. And the person who changed my mind was my older brother, Doug. He was arguing, and I were going back and forth. But, and finally he said something. And I said,
"Yeah, really?"
But I had nothing to say. And I thought about it, and I said, came back a couple times. Well, next time I saw him, we only see each other on occasions, and I said, you know what? You were right.
That's funny because
he said, wait a minute. Let me record that.
Let me sign this. I the libertarian side of me has always of course, I've always thought cannabis should be legal. It's ridiculous. It's a plant. But beyond that, with other drugs, I mean, I've always been open to the idea of people should make their own decision what they want to do with their own bodies, as long as they're not hurting somebody else and so forth and so on.
And because it's not good for you, it's not a compelling reason for the government to take away your freedom.
Exactly. All right. Well, you want to hear my top three?
Nah, I can't wait.
Sure? Okay. First one, number 3 for me is musical act. And I'm going to say the Beach Boys. I'm going to be honest. Growing up, I was a Beatles guy. Really? I was a Stones guy. I just never paid a lot of attention to the Beach Boys. It was, to me, they were bubblegum California. But as I got older,
I can see that. I love them.
Well, I do now. That's my point. I've realized, and with I just thought I'd pick this one with Brian Wilson passing away recently. Over time, especially seeing like Paul McCartney saying and John Lennon, both how influenced they were by the Beach Boys, to give them another listen and realizing, man, that Wilson dude, Brian, he could really write some cool stuff. I mean, he really had a grasp of harmony and melody.
And the songs, but also the arrangements
is really what I'm talking about. Yeah.
And the production, the music production.
And I think you have to go back in time and realize how far ahead of their time they were. So that's my number 3.
Well, I've always been a admirer and a kind of a sucker for rich vocal harmonies.
Same.
That's always kind of I've always kind of liked that.
So my number 2 is roller coasters. I used to, I used to love them and carnival rides and crap like that. But now, man, not
can't get you
not
on one now.
Happen. Yeah, totally. And it's not just an age thing because I was a lot younger when I realized that I didn't want to do them anymore. So that's my number 2. And with my number 1, might be a little controversial, but I'm going to go with Donald Trump.
Trump.
Because when he first came down that escalator and he first ran the first time, I thought, oh my God, is this a joke?
I'm not a fan. I was not a fan.
Either? Okay.
No, not that.
I was like, this guy's a clown, man. He's a TV, star, and he's an egomaniac and a narcissist. Some of that maybe.
And he's another Ross Perot.
Right.
Some business guy thinks he knows more about politics and politics. What the hell do you know?
Exactly. And that's how I looked at it.
Go back to Wall Street, you moron.
I've got to admit, I've turned it around.
Can't argue with the results.
Some of it's not just Trump as a person, the way he's conducted himself in office, that he made promises running for office that he actually is fulfilling, whether you like it or not. You have to admit he's doing what he said he would do. How long has it been since we've had a president that's done that?
Yeah, and I have to interject that I think those things speak to him as a human being.
You're right. And that's what I've come around on. And learning more about his family. You know, everybody talked about his family and this. But if you just step back, and I'm not to throw Biden under the bus, but you talk about a dysfunctional family. Jeez, you know, the Biden.
Yeah, they were under the bus when we found them.
Look at the Trump family. It's really quite impressive. I mean, his kids, his grandkids, they really seem to be good people. Anyway, we don't need, this isn't a political commercial for Trump. That's my number one. I have definitely changed my mind on Donald Trump. And finally, to close out, Phil, we've got our news you can't use article. And I pulled this out.
Wait a minute, use news you can't use?
That's correct. It's totally worthless, but maybe interesting, maybe a little funny. To me, this is just interesting. This is out of the AP Today by Dave Collins and Joe Frederick. And it's a story about a meteorite. It turns out that Sotheby's named
Samuel. No, go ahead.
Samuel what?
I don't know. It's just the way you said it was like almost Dr. Seuss. It's a story about a meteorite that fell down to Earth one night.
No, this is a real story out of New York. Sotheby's is having a auction, and so they've got this rock. It's a 54-pound rock that was a meteorite that landed, that blew off of Mars. And there's a long explanation of how they determined this. A comet or something hit Mars and blew this thing off. And it's a 1,000,000,000,000 odds of this happening.
It's just a big old chunk that's floating around in space, and we happen to catch it
towards Earth. But part of the miracle is it didn't burn up in our atmosphere. This 54-pound rock landed on Earth. So here's the bottom line. They're expecting it to go for somewhere between $2 and $4 million.
Wow.
Yeah, man, that's a rock. You got a bid on it?
And the people who are going to spend that kind of money on it just to say that they've got it.
And to say they've got the money. That's it.
To show it off at parties and say, this is from Mars.
This red and brown and gray hunk is about 70% larger than the next largest piece of Mars found on Earth and represents nearly 7% of all the Martian material currently on our planet. Sotheby's says it measures nearly 15 inches by 11 inches by 6 inches. And that's pretty incredible. It also is an incredibly rare find. There are only about 400 Martian meteorites out of the more than 77,000 officially recognized meteorites on the Earth.
I'm still not paying $2 million for it, even if I had it.
They did some kind of chemical analysis to determine that it comes from Mars. So,
yeah, if I'm going to buy something from Mars, it's going to be filled with fluffy nougat and covered with rich milk chocolate.
Almonds. All right, well, that's it for our news you can't use. I thought that was fun.
I thought it was pretty cool. If you've got a comment about anything that we've discussed today, whether it's Trump or Tom Brady or
the Beach Boys,
democracies and republics, slap a comment down below. We will read it and we will discuss it. Of course, don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe. Tell a friend about what we're doing here. And we will see you next time on The Physics of Civics.